The envelope from Seaboard Crest Mortgage was heavy. Inside, a stamped confirmation stopped my heart, paid in full. Most people spend decades praying for those 3 words. But standing on my porch, I felt only dread. I had 27 years left on that loan and $0 extra to my name. This was not a miracle. It was the first crack in the foundation, a silent warning that my life was no longer my own. The envelope was heavy, the kind of heavy that usually meant bad news or legal threats, but the return address was Seaboard Crest Mortgage. I stood on my front porch in Harbor Point, the humid Massachusetts air sticking my shirt to my back, and stared at the logo. My heart did a slow, painful thud against my ribs. I knew exactly what day it was. It was the 12th of the month. My payment had cleared 6 days ago. I checked my bank account every morning, a habit I had picked up after the divorce, when financial surprises had become a daily routine of survival. I ripped the flap open right there on the mat, not waiting to get inside. I pulled out a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper. It was not a late notice. It was not an escrow adjustment. In the center of the page, stamped in bold, blue ink, were 3 words, paid in full. I blinked, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something logical. Perhaps it said, partial payment received or payment failed. But the words stayed put. Below the stamp, a polite block of text congratulated me on satisfying my obligation to Seaboard Crest Mortgage. It referenced my loan number, the property address I was currently standing in front of, and a 0 balance. A cold prickle of sweat broke out on the back of my neck. This was a mistake, a clerical error, a computer glitch where someone typed a 1 instead of a 0. I had 27 years left on this mortgage. I had done the math 1,000 times. I knew that if I paid an extra $50 a month, I could shave off 3 years. But I did not have an extra $50. I barely had the regular payment. I walked inside, locking the door behind me. The house was quiet. It was a small Cape Cod-style build, modest and needing a new roof. But it was mine. It was the only thing I had fought for during the split with Graham. He had taken the investments, the newer car, and the debt. But I had taken the house. It was my anchor. It was the proof that Ellie Griffin, project manager and 33-year-old divorcee, was standing on her own 2 feet. I dropped my keys on the console table and went straight to my laptop. My hands were shaking so bad I mistyped my password twice. When I finally hit enter on the Seaboard Crest portal, the screen did not show my familiar dashboard with the principal balance graph I obsessed over. Instead, a red banner flashed across the top: account access disabled. Below that, in smaller gray text, it read, "Access to this account has been suspended for security reasons. Please contact our loss mitigation department immediately." I grabbed my phone. I did not call the number on the screen. I called the number I had saved in my contacts, the general customer service line I had used when I set up my autopay 3 years ago. The automated system asked for my social security number. I keyed it in. "We are unable to locate an active loan with those credentials." The robotic voice said. My stomach dropped. It felt like I was in a free fall. I pressed 0. I pressed it again. Finally, a human voice answered. "Thank you for calling Seaboard Crest. This is Marcus." "Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My name is Ellie Griffin. I just received a letter saying my mortgage is paid off. That is impossible. I owe nearly $200,000. There was a silence on the line. The sound of typing. "Ms. Griffin, can you verify your mailing address?" I rattled off my address. 14 Maple Terrace, Harbor Point, Massachusetts. Another pause. "That does not match the address on file," Marcus said. What I gripped the edge of the desk. "I have lived here for 5 years. I have never changed my address. I show a recent update to a post office box in Burlington." Marcus said, "And for security verification, can you tell me the last 4 digits of the phone number associated with the account I gave him my number? 7294? I am sorry. That is incorrect," he said, his voice flattening into professional detachment. "It is not incorrect." I snapped, my panic rising. "It is my phone number. It has been my number since college. I have a number ending in 88 here." Ma'am, he said, since you cannot verify the security questions, I cannot discuss the account details. You will need to visit a branch with 2 forms of identification. He hung up before I could scream. I sat there in the silence of my living room. The house suddenly felt different. The walls, which usually felt like a fortress, now felt like paper. Someone had changed my address. Someone had changed my phone number. And someone had paid off $200,000 of debt. The logical part of my brain, the part that managed million-dollar construction schedules at work, tried to take over. This is fraud. It whispered, but it was a weird kind of fraud. Thieves stole money. They did not pay off mortgages. Thieves drained accounts. They did not fill them. I looked at the clock. It was 7 in the evening. The branches were closed. I would have to wait until tomorrow. The next morning at the office was a blur of noise and light that I could barely process. I sat in the glass-walled conference room, nodding as my boss, David, talked about supply chain delays for the mesmerizing downtown renovation project we were bidding on. He was talking about steel beam lead times and labor shortages. Ellie, do you think we can squeeze the vendor for a better rate? David asked. Looking at me, I stared at the whiteboard. The numbers on it looked like alien hieroglyphs. All I could see was the stamped "paid in full" in my mind. Ellie. I blinked. Yes, I said, my voice sounding hollow. I will call them this afternoon. We have leverage. I was lying. I had no idea if we had leverage. I felt like I was vibrating, a low-frequency hum of anxiety that started in my chest and radiated out to my fingertips. Every time my phone buzzed in my pocket, I jumped, expecting it to be Seaboard Crest telling me they had foreclosed, or the police telling me I was being evicted. This house was everything. After the divorce, Graham had told me I would never be able to maintain it on a single income. He had laughed when I said I would refinance the divorce settlement into the equity. He said I was sentimental and bad at math. Keeping the house was not just about having a roof. It was about proving him wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could build a life that did not collapse when a man walked out of it. I skipped lunch. At 2:00, I told David I had a migraine and needed to leave. It was the first time in 5 years I had left work early for anything other than a dentist appointment. The Seaboard Crest branch in Harbor Point was located in a strip mall near the marina, sandwiched between a high-end coffee shop and a dry cleaner. It was quiet inside, the air conditioning humming, the carpet smelling of industrial cleaner. I sat across from a representative named Andrew. He was young, wearing a suit that was slightly too large for him, and he looked tired. I placed the letter, my driver's license, and my passport on his desk. I need to understand what is happening. I said, I did not pay this loan off. Andrew typed for a long time. He frowned at his screen, then looked at my ID, then back at the screen. He turned his monitor slightly away from me, a defensive gesture that made my stomach turn. Ms. Griffin, according to our records, this loan was satisfied 3 days ago, he said. Satisfied how I asked. With what money? The funds came from a wire transfer, he said, following a cash-out refinance that was finalized 2 months ago. I stared at him. The room seemed to tilt. Refinance, I whispered. I never refinanced. He turned the screen back towards me. It says here you closed on a new loan with a private lender, took the equity out in cash, and then, 3 days ago, that new loan was also paid off, along with the original balance. It is a bit unusual to pay it off so quickly, but the account is closed. You are free and clear. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. I did not sign for a new loan, I said, my voice rising. I did not take any equity out. Show me the signature. Andrew looked uncomfortable. I do not have the physical file here. Ms. Griffin, that would be with the title company or the legal team, but the system notes a notarized signature packet was received, and there is a note here about the mailing address update to the post office box to ensure security during the transaction. Who I demanded. Who notarized it. He clicked a few more tabs. It looks like the closing was handled remotely. The notary stamp is listed from Dawnmere Legal Services. I had never heard of them. I grabbed my purse. This is fraud. I said, I want you to flag this account. There is no account to flag. Ms. Griffin, Andrew said gently, it is closed. The balance is 0. I walked out of the bank into the blinding afternoon sun. I felt sick. A cash-out refinance meant someone had borrowed against the value of my home, but then they had paid it off. It did not make sense. If you steal a house, you steal the equity and run. You do not pay off the underlying mortgage unless you are trying to clear the title, unless you are trying to own it completely. I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard I could not put the key in the ignition. I needed to talk to someone who would tell me I was overreacting. I needed someone to tell me this was a computer error and not a theft. I called my mother. Marlene answered on the second ring. Hello? Darling? Her voice was bright, chirpy, too chirpy, usually. When I called Marlene in the middle of a workday, she answered with a worried tone. Assuming I was in the hospital or had been fired, she was a woman who thrived on low-grade catastrophe. Mom, I said, something weird is happening. What is it? She asked. She did not ask if I was okay. She just asked what it was. I got a letter from the mortgage company. I said, they say my house is paid off. There was a silence on the other end. It was short, maybe half a second, but it was heavy. It was the silence of someone holding their breath. Oh, honey, that is wonderful, she exclaimed. Her voice went up an octave. Finally, you are free? I froze. Free? I asked. Mom, I did not pay it. I do not have $200,000. It is a mistake. I think someone stole my identity. No, do not be silly, she said, rushing the words. Why do you always go to the negative? Maybe it is a blessing. Maybe the bank made a mistake in your favor. You should celebrate. Her reaction was wrong. Any other time, Marlene would be telling me to call the police. She would be telling me to check my credit score. She would be spinning a story about how her neighbor's cousin got scammed by a Nigerian prince, but now she was telling me to accept a magical $200,000 gift. Mom, I said slowly, why do you sound like you are not surprised? I'm just happy for you. Ellie, look, I was actually just thinking about coming over. I picked up that Thai food you like. I will be there in 20 minutes. She hung up before I could say no. I sat in the hot car, staring at the dashboard. My mother was coming over. Marlene never came over on a weeknight. She claimed the traffic in Harbor Point gave her palpitations. She stayed in her condo on the other side of the river. Surrounded by her porcelain figurines and her heavily curated version of reality, I drove home on autopilot. When I pulled into the driveway, I looked at my house. It looked the same. The hydrangeas were blooming blue and purple by the steps. The paint on the trim was still chipping slightly, but it felt different. It felt like I was trespassing. Marlene pulled in 10 minutes later. She drove a pristine white sedan that always smelled of vanilla air freshener. She bustled out of the car carrying 3 plastic bags and a bouquet of grocery store flowers. Surprise, she yelled, waving the flowers. She was wearing a new blouse, something silk and expensive looking. She looked younger than her 60 years. Her hair dyed a fierce, unmoving blonde. I unlocked the front door and she swept past me, depositing the bags on the kitchen island. I got pad thai and those spring rolls, she said, and I brought wine. This calls for a toast. Mom, I said, leaning against the counter. I am not toasting. I just came from the bank. They said someone refinanced my house 2 months ago. They said there is a notarized signature. Marlene busied herself opening the wine. She did not look at me. Well, banks are complicated. Ellie, you know how they are with paperwork. It is not paperwork. I said, it is forgery. She stopped pulling the cork and sighed. A dramatic, long-suffering sound. You always make everything so dramatic. Listen to me. You have been struggling so hard since Graham left. I see it. The dark circles under your eyes. The way you never buy yourself new clothes. What does that have to do with my mortgage? I wanted to help, she said. She turned around. A beatific smile plastered on her face. I came into a little bit of a family opportunity, an investment, and I thought, what is the best way to help my girl to give her a fresh start? I stared at her. The air in the kitchen felt suddenly thin. You, I asked. You paid off the mortgage I helped clean up the paperwork, she said, waving her hand vaguely. It was a mess. Ellie, you had that high rate. And the terms were terrible. I just straightened it out. How, I asked. Mom, you live on a fixed income. You complain when the price of eggs goes up. How did you pay off $200,000 I told you? She said, her voice tightening. A family opportunity. Your Aunt Linda and I. We consolidated some things. It is complicated financial stuff. You would not be interested. The point is, you do not have a payment anymore. You can breathe. She poured the wine and held a glass out to me. I did not take it. You forged my signature, I asked. I acted as your agent, she said, looking offended. It is not forgery if it is family. It is implied consent. I knew you would be too proud to take the money if I offered it directly. You are stubborn. Ellie, just like your father. So I handled it. I felt a wave of dizziness. You cannot just handle a mortgage. Mom, you have to sign legal documents. You have to have a notary. Oh, details. She scoffed. I have a friend who helped. It is all legal. You are the owner. The house is yours. No bank owns it. You should be thanking me. She took a sip of her wine, her eyes challenging me. I looked at the counter. The letter from Seaboard Crest was still sitting there. Marlene glanced at it. See, she said, tapping the paper with a manicured nail. Loan number ending in 4291. Paid in full. That is a golden ticket. Ellie. My blood ran cold. I never showed you the letter. I said quietly. She paused, the glass halfway to her mouth. What, I never showed you the letter? I left it on the counter when I went to work. You just got here. How do you know the loan number? Marlene blinked. Her smile faltered, then returned. Tighter this time. Well, you mentioned it. On the phone. No. I said, I did not. I said I got a letter. I never said the number. She set the glass down, a little too hard. Wine sloshed over the rim. You are being paranoid. I have seen your statements before. I have a memory for numbers. You know that. I knew nothing of the sort. Marlene forgot my birthday half the time. She forgot where she put her keys daily. I need to sit down. I said. Marlene rolled her eyes. Eat some pad thai. You are low blood sugar. That is why you are being irrational. I give you a gift worth $250,000, and you interrogate me like a criminal. She started unpacking the food, the plastic containers making loud snapping sounds in the quiet kitchen. I watched her. She was moving with a frantic energy, her hands fluttering. I am going to the bathroom, I said. I walked down the hall, past the bathroom, and into the spare bedroom I used as an office. I closed the door silently. My metal filing cabinet was in the corner. I was meticulous about my filing, alphabetical, color-coded. It was one of the ways I managed my anxiety. I pulled open the drawer marked House. The hanging folders were usually perfectly vertical, but the green folder labeled Mortgage Docs was sitting at an angle. Like it had been pulled out and shoved back in hastily. The metal tab was bent. I pulled it out. The papers inside were shuffled. My original closing disclosure, usually at the back, was in the front, and there was a page missing the amortization schedule I kept on top to track my progress. I felt a sick realization settle in my gut. Marlene had a key. I had given it to her 3 years ago for emergencies. She had been here. She had been in my house, in my office, rifling through my private financial documents while I was at work. I put the folder back and went to my desk. I woke up my computer. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Harbor Point Registry of Deeds. Search by address. I typed in 14 Maple Terrace. The page loaded agonizingly slow. The little spinning wheel mocked me. Finally, the list of recorded documents appeared. There it was. Date 2 days ago. Type, quitclaim deed. Grantor Eleanor Claire Griffin. Grantee Griffin, Family Holdings, LLC. I clicked on the document image. It opened as a PDF. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. It was a deed transferring my home, my sanctuary, out of my name and into a company I had never heard of. And there, at the bottom of the page, was my signature, Eleanor Claire Griffin. It looked like my handwriting. The loops on the L's were sweeping. The G was sharp, but it was too neat. It lacked the slight rush I always had when I signed my name, and I hadn't used Eleanor Clare on a legal document since I graduated college. I always signed LEC Griffin. I looked at the notary stamp, Donmere Legal Services, the same name the bank representative had mentioned. I looked at the grantee address for Griffin Family Holdings, LLC. It was listed as a suite number in an office park on the edge of town. I stood up, pushing my chair back. The floor felt unsteady. Marlene hadn't just paid off my mortgage. She hadn't just cleaned up paperwork. She had taken my house. I walked back out to the kitchen. Marlene was plating the food, humming a little tune. She looked up when I entered, holding out a fork. "Here we go. Eat up. You will feel better." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the tightness around her eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach them. I saw a stranger wearing my mother's face. "Who is Griffin Family Holdings, LLC?" I asked. The fork clattered onto the plate. Marlene froze. "Oh," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You saw that?" "I saw it." I said, "You transferred the title. You didn't just pay the loan. You took the house. It is a holding company." "Ellie," she cried, abandoning the pretense of calm. "It is for protection if you get sued, or if Graham comes back for more money. The house is safe. It is an LLC. It is standard asset protection." Rhett said it was the smartest way to do it. "Rhett," I asked. "Who is Rhett?" She covered her mouth with her hand, realizing she had slipped. "He is a financial advisor, a brilliant man. He is helping me manage the family investments." "You put my house in an LLC, controlled by you?" I asked. "Controlled by us," she insisted. "It is Griffin Family Holdings. Griffin. That is us." I walked over to the counter and picked up the deed printout I had brought from the office. "This doesn't say us." "Mom, it lists the manager as Marlene Griffin. I am not on here." "It is a technicality," she shouted, her face flushing red. "I am doing this for you. Why can't you just trust me?" "Because you forged my signature," I screamed back. The sound of my own voice shocked me. I never yelled at my mother. I managed her. I tolerated her. But I never yelled. Marlene burst into tears. It was a sudden, violent sobbing. "I am trying to save you," she wailed. "You are all alone in this big house, drowning in debt. And I am trying to give you a future. I am your mother. I would never hurt you." She slumped against the counter, looking small and frail. The performance was impeccable. A part of me, the trained daughter part, wanted to rush forward and hug her, to apologize for being ungrateful. But then I looked at the deed again. I looked at the paid in full letter. I didn't hug her. I didn't apologize. "I think you should leave," I said. Marlene stopped crying instantly. She looked up, her eyes hard and dry. "You are kicking me out." "After I just paid for your home." "It is not my home anymore." "Is it?" I said. "It belongs to the LLC." She straightened her blouse, smoothing the silk with trembling hands. "You will see. Ellie, in a few days, you will calm down and realize this is the best thing that ever happened to you. I am securing our legacy." She grabbed her purse and marched to the door. She didn't look back. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I stood in the silence, the smell of cooling pad thai filling the room. I felt cold, despite the summer heat. I walked to the window and watched her white car peel out of the driveway. I looked down at the paperwork in my hand. The quitclaim deed, the paid-in-full notice. I had no mortgage, but I also had no house. I went back to my computer. I needed to know who Rhett was. I needed to know what Donmere Legal Services was. And I needed to know why my mother, a woman who hoarded coupons and feared the internet, was suddenly setting up LLCs and wiring hundreds of thousands of dollars. I wasn't free. I was trapped in something I couldn't see the edges of yet. And the person holding the key was the one person who was supposed to protect me. I picked up my phone and took a picture of the deed. Then I took a picture of the letter. I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Evidence. It felt like a betrayal just typing the word. But as I looked at the empty driveway where my mother's car had been, I realized the betrayal had already happened. I was just the last one to know about it. The morning sun hit the brick facade of the Harbor Point Registry of Deeds, but it offered no warmth. I stood outside the heavy glass doors, my hand gripping the strap of my purse so hard my knuckles were white. This was a place where people came to record new beginnings, first homes, business expansions, inheritances. I was here to witness a theft. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and floor wax. I took a number and waited. When my turn came, I approached the clerk, a woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and a name tag that read, Barbara. I need to pull the most recent deed recorded for 14 Maple Terrace. I said, my voice sounded steady, which was a miracle given that my stomach was doing acrobatic flips. Barbara typed slowly, her acrylic nails clicking against the keys. That would be the quitclaim from 2 days ago, she asked. Not looking up. Yes, I said. She hit print. The machine whirred, spitting out 3 pages. I paid the copy fee with a $10 bill and didn't wait for the change. I walked over to a high wooden table in the corner, away from the prying eyes of the attorneys and title runners bustling around the room. I laid the document flat. The top of the page read, Quitclaim Deed, Grantor Eleanor Claire Griffin. Grantee Griffin Family Holdings, LLC. Seeing it on a screen was one thing. Holding the physical paper was another. It carried the weight of reality. I traced the line where my property, the physical structure that held my life, was signed away for the sum of $1 and other good and valuable consideration. I looked at the signature. Eleanor Claire Griffin. I stared at it until the black ink blurred. It was a good forgery. If I were a stranger, I would have accepted it without question. But I knew the pressure points of my own hand. The loops on the E were too round. The tail of the N didn't flick up sharply enough. But it was the name itself that made my skin crawl. Eleanor Claire. Nobody called me that. Not since I walked across the stage at graduation. Not since I filled out my marriage license with Graham. In my adult life, I was Ellie. On my checks, I was Ellie. On my driver's license, I was Ellie. Only one person still used Eleanor Claire, and usually only when she was trying to evoke a sense of guilt or grandeur. I looked at the notary block. The stamp was crisp and dark. Commonwealth of Massachusetts, County of Essex. Personally appeared before me, the above-named Eleanor Claire Griffin, and proved to me through satisfactory evidence of identification to be the person whose name is signed on the preceding or attached document. Notary. Public Sarah J. Jenkins. Commission expires January 12, 2028. Below the stamp was a printed address for the notary's employer, Don Meir Legal Services, 210 Industrial Parkway, Suite B. I took a picture of the page with my phone, ensuring the flash was off. Then I folded the deed and put it in my purse. I felt like I was carrying a grenade. I walked back to my car and sat in the driver's seat. I didn't start the engine. Instead, I dialed my mother. She picked up on the first ring, her voice breathless. Ellie, I was just thinking about you. I found the cutest throw pillows at HomeGoods, and I thought I went to the Registry of Deeds. Mom, I interrupted. The line went dead silent. The background noise of a shopping cart rattling ceased. Oh, she said. Her voice dropped an octave. Why would you do that? I wanted to see who owns my house. I said, it turns out, I don't. A company called Griffin Family Holdings, LLC does. And apparently, I signed it over to them, except I didn't. Ellie, please, she said, the cheerfulness evaporating into a sharp, defensive edge. We talked about this last night. It is a protective measure. You forged my signature. I said, you signed Eleanor Claire. You haven't called me that in 10 years. I did what was necessary, she snapped. You are so hung up on the details. Look, do you remember 3 years ago when you were going through the divorce? You were a mess. You were crying on my couch, terrified Graham was going to take the house. You told me, Mom, help me keep this place. I will do anything. I blinked, looking out the windshield at the passing traffic. I was venting. Mom, I was heartbroken. I didn't mean commit a felony for me 3 years later. You asked me to help if anything ever happened, she insisted, her voice gaining strength, rewriting history in real time. This is me helping. I set up the LLC to insulate the asset. If Graham tries to come back for more alimony, or if you get sued at work, the house is untouchable. It is in the LLC. It is safe. It is not safe if I don't control it, I shouted. Who is the manager of the LLC? Mom, is it you? It is temporary, she cried, just until the dust settles. Once everything is secure, we can add you as a member. I am just holding it. I am the mother. I am the matriarch. It is my job to hold the umbrella when it rains. It is not raining, I said. You are creating the storm. You are being ungrateful, she said, her voice trembling with that weaponized fragility I knew so well. I pay off your debt. I secure your future. And you treat me like a criminal. I have half a mind to what I asked, to give it back. Please do. I have to go, she said abruptly. My chest hurts. You are giving me palpitations. She hung up. I stared at the phone. My hands were shaking again. She was doing it. She was twisting reality until I felt like the crazy one. She had taken a moment of my vulnerability from years ago and weaponized it into a permission slip for fraud. I started the car. I wasn't going home. I was going to Industrial Parkway. Dawnmere Legal Services was located in a depressing strip of flex warehouse spaces on the edge of town. Sandwiched between a tile showroom and a CrossFit gym, the windows were tinted dark, and a vinyl banner zip-tied above the door read, Fast Closings, Title Transfer, Estate Planning. I parked and walked to the door. It was locked. I peered through the glass. Inside, the waiting room was small and beige, with a few stackable chairs and a reception desk that looked like it had been bought at a surplus auction. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked harder. A buzzer sounded, and the lock clicked. I pushed the door open. A woman sat behind the desk. She was young, maybe 22, wearing a headset and scrolling on her phone. She didn't look like a legal professional. She looked like someone waiting for a shift to end. Can I help you? She asked, barely glancing up. I am looking for Sarah Jenkins, I said. The girl paused. She looked at me, then at a closed door behind her. Sarah is in a meeting. Do you have an appointment? I said, but she notarized a deed with my signature on it 2 days ago. I was not here. I have never met her. I want to know how that happened. The girl's expression shifted from boredom to guarded alert. She took the headset off. Ms. Jenkins doesn't see walk-ins. You have to email for a consultation. I don't want a consultation, I said, leaning my hands on the high counter. I want to know why your office facilitated a fraudulent transfer of my property. Ma'am, you need to leave, the girl said. Her voice was rehearsed, like she had said this phrase many times before. If you have a legal inquiry, send it in writing. I looked at the closed door. There was no nameplate, just a generic wood grain. Is she even back there, I asked? Or is Sarah Jenkins just a stamp in a drawer? The girl stood up. I am calling the police. I looked at her. She wasn't bluffing. She looked scared, but also practiced. This wasn't a law office. It was a mill. I will leave, I said. But tell Sarah I will be back, with a subpoena. I turned and walked out. As I reached the door, I saw a framed certificate on the wall. It was a membership plaque for the Association of Private Lenders. And right below it, a small flyer tack pinned to the corkboard, Need Cash Fast Commercial and Residential Hard Money Solutions. I stepped back into the sunlight, my mind racing. My mother didn't find this place in the phone book. This was a place you went when you couldn't go to a real bank. This was the underbelly. I needed help, not emotional help, but technical help. I needed someone who understood the machinery of what had just happened to me. I drove to a coffee shop downtown and opened my laptop. I searched my contacts for Tessa Ward. She was a paralegal I had met at a networking event years ago. She worked for a high-end real estate firm in Boston. We exchanged Christmas cards, but we weren't close. I sent her a text. Emergency. Real estate fraud question. Can I buy you a coffee or a drink, please? She replied 3 minutes later. I am at the Roost on 4th Street. Come now. Tessa was sitting in a booth, surrounded by red-welled folders. She looked sharp, efficient, and terrifyingly competent. I sat down and slid the copy of the quitclaim deed across the table. I explained everything: the letter, the payoff, the deed, the LLC. I left out the part about my mother at first. Just saying, a relative. Tessa read the deed, her eyes scanning the lines with laser focus. She took a sip of her black coffee and set the cup down. "Okay," she said. "Here is the nightmare scenario. Do you want the sugar-coated version or the truth?" "The truth." I said. "You don't own your house," she said bluntly. "Griffin Family Holdings, LLC, owns your house. You are a tenant, a squatter, effectively, unless you have a lease agreement, but I live there." I said, "I pay I used to pay the mortgage." "Possession is not title," Tessa said. "Here is the terrifying logic. Ellie, if the title is in an LLC, the manager of that LLC can do whatever they want with the asset. They can take out a new mortgage against it. They can sell it to a developer who wants to bulldoze it. They can use it as collateral for a business loan." She tapped the paper. "And since it is a quitclaim deed, you gave up all rights. You didn't just transfer it. You disclaimed interest. You said, 'I don't want this anymore.'" I felt the blood drain from my face. "My mother did this," I whispered. "She is the manager. She says she is protecting me." Tessa's expression softened, but only slightly. "Ellie, that is the oldest con in the book. Asset protection schemes are often just Trojan horses for stripping equity. If she controls the LLC, she controls the equity. How much equity did you have?" "About $200,000. I said, "Maybe more with the market up. That is a lot of money to leave sitting on the table." Tessa said, "If she takes out a loan against the LLC, she can pull that cash out. And since the LLC is a corporate entity, the loan terms can be predatory. High interest, short term, hard money." "Dawnmere Legal," I said. "They had a flyer for hard money loans." Tessa grimaced. "You need to lock this down. Today. But here's the problem to undo a recorded deed. You usually need a court order. You have to prove fraud. And to prove fraud, you have to prove you didn't sign it, which means I have to accuse my mother of a crime." I finished. Tessa nodded. "Identity theft, forgery, uttering false documents. If you file a police report, it pauses everything. It creates a cloud on title. No lender will touch the property if there is an active fraud investigation, but if you don't file," she let the sentence hang there. "If I don't file, she can borrow against it." I said, "She might have already." Tessa said, "You said the first mortgage was paid off. Where did that money come from? I don't know." I said, "She said a family opportunity." Tessa leaned forward. "People don't just find $200,000 in the couch cushions. Ellie, she got that money from somewhere. And if she used your house to get it, she had to have the title first. But the deed was recorded after the payoff, yes." I said, "The payoff was 3 days ago. The deed was recorded 2 days ago." Tessa frowned. "That is backward. Usually, you record the deed and the new mortgage at the same time. Unless what? Unless she got a bridge loan or an unsecured personal loan based on the promise of the asset. Ellie, you need to pull your credit report. Not the free summary from your bank app. The real one. The full 3-bureau report. Look for inquiries. Look for anything that doesn't belong." I left Tessa with a stomach full of acid. I went home to the house that wasn't mine and locked the door. I put the chain on. It felt ridiculous. Locking a door against the person who effectively owned the lock. I sat at my kitchen table as the sun went down, casting long shadows across the floor. I opened my laptop and went to the annual credit report site. I answered the security questions. The report generated. It was 50 pages long. I scrolled past my student loans, my car payment, my old credit cards, and then I saw it. Under the section labeled Inquiries, Requests for Your Credit History, there was a hit from 2 months ago. Cobalt Ridge Private Lending. I had never heard of them. I scrolled down to the Account History section. There was a new trade line. Creditor Cobalt Ridge. Type short-term/bridge. Status paid/closed. High balance. $210,000. I stared at the screen. Someone had taken out a loan in my name for $210,000. That was the money. That was the family opportunity. They had used my credit to get the cash to pay off my mortgage. But why? Why swap one debt for another? I clicked on the details. The contact phone number listed for the borrower was not mine. It was a number I knew by heart. It was Marlene's cell phone. I grabbed a notebook. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the creditor name. I wrote down the amount. Then I started a timeline. May 15th. Inquiry from Cobalt Ridge. May 20th, loan opened. July 10th. Seaboard Crest, mortgage paid off. July 11th. Quitclaim deed signed allegedly. July 12th. Deed recorded. I felt a wave of nausea. I was building a case. I was assembling the evidence that would send my mother to prison. I felt guilty. A deep, corroding shame that I was betraying the woman who raised me. She had made me soup when I was sick. She had sewn my prom dress. But she had also stolen my identity. My phone rang. It was Graham. I debated ignoring it. I didn't have the energy for Graham, but the silence in the house was too loud. I picked up. "Hey," I said. "I heard about the registry." Graham said, "No hello. No pleasantries. Just straight to the point." Harbor Point was a small town. How I asked. "My cousin works in the clerk's office." He said, "She saw your name come across the wire. Griffin Family Holdings." "Really?" "Ellie." "What kind of mess are you in?" "It is not a mess," I said, defensive out of habit. "It is a family restructuring. Don't give me that corporate speak." Graham laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "That sounds like Marlene. Did she talk you into this?" I didn't say anything. "Ellie, listen to me," Graham said, his voice dropping the mocking tone. "If Marlene is running this, you are in trouble. You know how she is with money. She acts like it is magic. She burned through your dad's life insurance in 2 years." "I know," I whispered. "If she has title to that house, she is going to leverage it." Graham said, "You need to hit hard. Don't go soft, because she is your mom. You need a shark. I am handling it." I said, "You are not handling it." He said, "You are drowning. I can hear it in your voice. I have a buddy, a litigator in Boston. He eats fraud cases for breakfast. I can give him a call. He will freeze her assets before she can blink." "No," I said, "not yet. I don't want a public war." "Graham, she is my mother. She is a liability." Graham said, "And if you let her, she will drag you down with her. Don't say I didn't warn you." He hung up. I sat there in the dark. Graham was a jerk. But he was right. Marlene was a liability. I stood up to get a glass of water. As I walked to the front door to check the lock one last time, I saw something on the porch. I opened the door. There was a large vase of flowers sitting on the welcome mat. Lilies and roses. Expensive ones. I picked up the card. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope, just like the one from the mortgage company. I opened it. In Marlene's looping, chaotic handwriting, it read, "To my brave girl, here is to new beginnings and a debt-free life. I love you more than you know. Mom." I looked at the flowers. They were beautiful. They smelled sweet and cloying. My stomach flipped. I leaned over the railing and dry heaved into the bushes. It wasn't a gift. It was a victory lap. She was celebrating the heist. She honestly believed she had done something good. Or she was so committed to the lie that she had to perform it until the end. I took the flowers inside. I didn't put them in water. I put them on the counter next to the paid in full letter and the quitclaim deed. I took a picture of the arrangement, evidence item number 4. I went to my laptop and opened a new document. I typed the header, Affidavit of Facts. I started typing. I, Eleanor Claire Griffin, being of sound mind. I typed until my fingers hurt. I typed until the sun came up. I wasn't just a project manager anymore. I was a victim, and I was going to have to be my own savior. The reception area of Halstead and Bryn Legal, felt like a sanctuary, the kind of place where chaos was ordered into neat, color-coded files. The carpet was thick, dampening the sound of my footsteps, and the air smelled of coffee and expensive leather. It was a stark contrast to the strip mall grime of Dawnmere Legal Services. I sat on a tufted gray sofa, clutching my folder of evidence like it was a shield. When Nina Halstead came out to greet me, she did not look like the sharks Graham had described. She was petite, wearing a soft cardigan over a silk blouse, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. But when we sat down in her office and she opened my file, her eyes sharpened. She read the timeline I had constructed. She studied the quitclaim deed. She looked at the credit inquiry from Cobalt Ridge. She took a long sip of water before speaking. "Ellie," she said, her voice low and precise, "I need you to understand the gravity of what we are looking at. We are not just talking about a family dispute or a boundary issue. We are looking at a trifecta of felonies." I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. "I know it is bad," I said. "It is identity theft," Nina continued, ticking the points off on her fingers. "It is forgery of a legal instrument, and it is fraudulent conveyance. That is the legal term for transferring property to avoid debt or, in this case, to strip equity. If your mother did this, she did not just break a rule, she broke the law in a way that carries prison time." Prison time. The words hung in the air between us. I shifted in my chair. "She thinks she is helping," I said. "The defense automatic. She has this idea that she is protecting the asset. She mentioned a financial mentor. Intent does not negate the act," Nina said. "If I steal a car because I think you are a bad driver and I want to keep you safe, I have still stolen a car." She leaned forward, clasping her hands on the desk. "My advice, as your attorney, is to file a police report immediately. Today, in the jurisdiction where the deed was recorded." I stared at the bookshelf behind her head, filled with thick volumes of case law. If I file a police report, what happens to her? An investigation is opened. Nina said, "They will interview the notary. They will subpoena the bank records. If the evidence holds up, the district attorney will likely press charges. But more importantly for you, the police report is the golden key. It allows us to freeze the credit bureaus. It gives us leverage to file a quiet title action to get the house back. Without it, the banks and the courts will look at this as a civil dispute between family members. They will tell us to work it out at Thanksgiving dinner." "I cannot arrest my mother," I whispered. Nina sighed, a sound of professional frustration tempered by empathy. "I see this often. Ellie, the predator relies on the silence of the prey, especially when they share a last name, but you need to decide what you are willing to lose, because right now, you have already lost the house. The question is whether you want to fight to get it back. I need to try one more thing," I said. "I need to give her a chance to explain. Maybe there is a document I am missing. Maybe I am reading this wrong." Nina looked at me with pity. "You are not reading it wrong, but if you need to confront her, do it carefully. Do not give her more information than she needs, and do not sign anything." I drove home with a headache that throbbed behind my eyes. I called Marlene from the car. I told her I needed to see the paperwork. I told her that if everything was as legal and protective as she claimed, she should have no problem showing me the closing statement from the payoff. She agreed, her voice tight but eager. She came over an hour later. We sat at my dining room table. The afternoon light was filtering through the sheer curtains, casting a soft glow on the wood. It was the same table where I had done my homework as a kid, where we had eaten birthday cakes and holiday meals. Now, it felt like an interrogation room. Marlene placed a folder on the table. She was wearing her church clothes, a navy skirt suit that she usually saved for Easter or funerals. It was a costume of respectability. "Here," she said, sliding a document toward me. "This is the settlement statement. You can see it is all above board." I opened the document. It was titled, "Settlement Statement Regarding the Transaction for 14 Maple Terrace." I looked at it with my project manager eyes. In my job, I reviewed contracts and change orders all day. I knew how to spot a formatting error from 10 feet away. The first thing I noticed was the logo at the top. It was the logo for Seaboard Crest Mortgage, but it was pixelated, the edges fuzzy, as if it had been copied and pasted from a low-resolution image. I looked at the font. The body of the text was in Times New Roman, but the numbers, the dollar amounts, were in Arial. The spacing between the lines was uneven. I looked at the date. July 10th. The numbers balanced perfectly. The payoff amount matched exactly what I owed, but there were no wire reference numbers. There were no title company file numbers. It looked like something a high school student would make in a computer lab. I looked up at Marlene. She was watching me. A tight, hopeful smile plastered on her face. "Mom," I said. "Who made this? The bank," she said quickly. "The closing agent sent it over." "Which closing agent?" I asked. "The one from the title company," she said. "Marwick Valley Title." I looked at the paper again. "This logo is blurry." "Mom, and the fonts don't match. This isn't an official document. You are nitpicking," she said, her smile wavering. "It is a copy. Printers do funny things." I set the paper down and looked her in the eye. I pulled my credit report. Mom, her hands, which were resting on the table, gave a violent twitch. She clasped them together, trying to hide the tremor. "Oh," she said, "I saw an inquiry." I said, "From a company called Cobalt Ridge Private Lending, and a new account, a bridge loan for $210,000. Marlene went pale. The rouge on her cheeks stood out like clown paint. "I do not know what that is," she said. "The inquiry is tied to your cell phone number." I said. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "Why are you digging for dirt? I solved your problem. You were drowning in that mortgage. Ellie, you were one paycheck away from disaster. I fixed it." "You didn't fix it," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "You swapped a 30-year mortgage with a low interest rate for a hard money loan that probably has a rate of 12% or higher. And you put the house in an LLC to do it. It is an investment strategy," she yelled. "Red explained it to me. We use the equity to generate cash flow. We pay off the bridge loan with the profits. It is how wealthy people operate. You are just too small-minded to see the big picture." "Rhett," I said. "There is that name again. Who is Cobalt Ridge?" "Mom, did Rhett introduce you to them?" She turned away. Walking toward the window. "You are so ungrateful. I spent my whole life sacrificing for you. I worked double shifts. I went without new clothes so you could have braces. I stayed in a marriage I hated for 5 years longer than I should have, just to keep a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me. By interrogating me like I am a common thief." "I am not talking about the past." I said, "I am talking about my house. It is our house," she screamed, spinning back to face me. "Families share. You would have nothing without me. Nothing." I looked at her. I saw the desperation in her eyes, the terrified, cornered animal look. She wasn't a mastermind. She was scared. But that didn't make her less dangerous. I stood up. "I want you to leave," I said. She grabbed her purse and the fake closing statement. "You will see," she spat. "When the dividends start coming in, you will come crawling back to apologize." She stormed out. I sat back down. My hands were shaking now, picking up the resonance of hers. She had lied to my face. She had handed me a forged document and dared me to call it real. And when I caught her, she didn't apologize. She attacked. I needed to know how deep the rot went. I walked into the kitchen and grabbed the stack of mail I had been ignoring. I sorted through it. Junk, bill. Then I stopped. There was a letter from Northline Mutual Insurance. It wasn't a bill. It was a notice of policy change. I tore it open. "Dear policyholder, per your request, we have updated the mailing address on your homeowner's policy to Post Office Box 492 in Burlington. Additionally, we have processed the endorsement adding Griffin Family Holdings, LLC, as an additional insured and loss payee." I felt the blood drain from my face. Loss payee. I worked in construction management. I knew what that meant. It meant that if the house burned down, the check wouldn't come to me. It would come to Griffin Family Holdings, LLC. It would come to Marlene. A dark, intrusive thought pushed its way into my mind. If the house burned down, The bridge loan would be paid off by the insurance, and Marlene would walk away with the difference. The house was worth more dead than alive to the LLC. I grabbed my phone and dialed the customer service number for Northline. "This is Ellie Griffin," I said when the agent answered. "Policy number 44921. I am holding a notice of change that I did not authorize. Let me pull that up." The agent said, "Yes, I see the request came in last week." How I asked, "How did you verify it was me?" The request was submitted in writing. The agent said, "With a signature. And since the LLC is the new title holder of record, they have a right to be listed on the policy." I felt trapped. The walls of the kitchen seemed to be closing in. They had thought of everything: the mortgage, the deed, the insurance. It was a total takeover. "Reverse it." I said, "I am the resident. I am the policyholder. I cannot remove the title holder without their consent," the agent said. "That is standard protocol. If the property has been sold or transferred, the new owner has an insurable interest." "It hasn't been sold," I shouted. "It was stolen." There was a silence on the line. "Ma'am, if this is a legal dispute regarding ownership, you will need to send us a court order. Until then, we have to honor the recorded deed." I hung up. I needed to find the notary. Sarah Jenkins. She was the one link that could prove I wasn't crazy. If she existed, and if she had notarized that deed, I needed to know why. I went back to the computer. I searched for Sarah Jenkins, Notary, Massachusetts. I found a listing on a professional association website. It didn't list Dawn Mere Legal Services as her employer. It listed a home address in a neighboring town and a personal cell phone number. I didn't call. I drove. The address was a small, neat ranch house with a manicured lawn and a tricycle in the driveway. It looked aggressively normal. I walked up the path and rang the bell. A woman answered. She was wearing yoga pants and a t-shirt covered in flour. She looked nothing like the type of person who would work at a shady loan shark operation. "Can I help you?" she asked, wiping her hands on a towel. "Are you Sarah Jenkins?" I asked. "The notary public." "Yes," she said, her expression guarding. "Who are you?" "My name is Ellie Griffin," I said. "I have a deed that was recorded 2 days ago with your stamp on it." The color drained from her face instantly. She didn't look guilty. She looked horrified. "Oh my God." She said, "Not again." Again I asked. She opened the door wider. "You better come in." I stepped into her living room. It smelled of baking cookies and lemon polish. "I reported my stamp stolen 3 months ago," Sarah said, not waiting for me to sit down. "I was doing a mobile closing at a coffee shop, and I went to the bathroom. When I came back, my bag was unzipped. The stamp and my journal were gone." "Did you report it?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "To the Secretary of the Commonwealth and the local police. I had to buy a new one with a different commission expiration date just to distinguish it." She went to a drawer and pulled out a police report. She handed it to me. I looked at the date. April 15th. "Can I see the deed?" she asked. I pulled the copy from my purse. She looked at the stamp. "That is the old one," she said, pointing to the expiration date. "And that is not my signature. Look at the J." I looped mine. "This is a straight line." She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Someone is using my stolen stamp to forge deeds. You are the third person who has come here in the last month." "Who were the others?" I asked. "An elderly couple who lost their rental property, and a man whose warehouse was transferred out from under him. They are targeting equity." "Did you tell the police about the other people?" "Yes." She said, "Detectives are looking into it, but they said it is a ring. They move fast. They use the stamp, record the documents, get the loans, and then vanish before anyone notices." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. My mother wasn't just working with a shady financial advisor. She had aligned herself, knowingly or not, with a criminal ring that stole notary stamps and targeted people's homes. I thanked Sarah and walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and just breathed for a minute. The betrayal was mutating. It wasn't just that Marlene wanted my money. It was that she had looked at me, her daughter, and seen a mark. She had seen an asset to be harvested. I thought back to the last 6 months, the Sunday phone calls, How much is your electric bill running these days? Honey, did you ever get that life insurance policy sorted out? What is your social security number again? I want to list you as a beneficiary on my IRA. I had answered her. I had answered every single question because I thought she was being a mother. I thought she was worrying about me. I realize now that she wasn't worrying. She was data mining. She was building the profile she needed to impersonate me. I felt tears prick my eyes. But they were hot, angry tears. I wiped them away furiously. I drove back toward the city, calling Nina on the hands-free system. The notary is a dead end. I said, or a smoking gun. Depending on how you look at it, her stamp was stolen. She filed a police report months ago. That is good. Nina said, it proves the deed is void ab initio void from the beginning. It wasn't just voidable. It was never valid. But we still need to prove your mother was the one who procured it. I told her about the insurance policy, the additional insured clause. That connects her. Nina said, she is the beneficiary of the fraud. That links Griffin Family Holdings to the stolen stamp. We need the Seaboard Crest file. I said, we need to see how they verified the refinance. I requested it. Nina said, her voice went tight. And that is the other news. They pushed back. What do you mean? They sent a notice of privacy review. They are claiming they need to redact third-party information before releasing the file. Ellie, usually that means their compliance department is panicking. They know they messed up. They likely dispensed funds without proper verbal verification, or they accepted a digital signature that didn't meet their standards. They are scrubbing the file. Can they do that? They can try, Nina said. But we will subpoena the raw metadata. They can't scrub that. I hung up as I pulled into the parking lot of my office. I was 2 hours late returning from lunch. I walked into the trailer. The air was thick with the smell of blueprints and stale coffee. My coworker, a junior estimator named Ben, looked up from his desk. Nice of you to join us, he said. He was smiling, trying to be funny. David was looking for the steel specs. I stopped. The sound of his voice grated on my nerves like sandpaper. I was handling a family emergency. Ben, I snapped. My voice was loud, echoing off the metal walls. So maybe you can focus on your own work instead of clocking my hours. Ben's smile vanished. The room went silent. The other engineers looked down at their desks. I'm sorry. Ellie? Ben stammered. I just meant, I didn't wait for him to finish. I walked into my office and slammed the door. I stood there, shaking. I was the stable one. I was the one who never lost her cool. I was the one who brought donuts on Fridays and remembered everyone's birthdays. I sank into my chair and put my head in my hands. I felt like I was cracking open. My phone buzzed. A text from Marlene. I left a casserole on your porch. Please eat. You look thin. Love you. I stared at the screen. The audacity of it. The weaponized care. She steals my house, then brings me a casserole. She destroys my financial future, then worries about my weight. I grabbed my keys and walked out. I couldn't be at work. I couldn't look at spreadsheets. I got into my car and just sat there. The heat was building up inside the vehicle, baking me, but I didn't turn on the AC. I wanted to feel the discomfort. I let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. I pounded the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I was 33 years old. I had a degree. I had a career. I had a 401k. I had done everything right. I had followed the rules. And now, I was going to have to destroy my mother to save myself. I looked at the rearview mirror. My eyes were red. My mascara smudged. I looked like a wreck. I drove home. When I got there, the casserole was on the porch. A Pyrex dish covered in foil. I picked it up. It was still warm. I walked to the trash can at the side of the house and dropped it in, dish and all. The sound of the glass shattering felt satisfying. I went inside and locked the door. I engaged the deadbolt. I looked at the walls of my living room. They used to feel like arms hugging me. Now, they felt like the walls of a cell. I was living in a crime scene. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a lie. I went to the closet and pulled out a chair. I wedged it under the doorknob. It was irrational. Marlene had a key, but I needed to feel like I could stop her. I sat on the floor with my back against the door and waited for the night to come. The house was mine, but the darkness belonged to her. 2 days later, Nina Halstead called me into her office. The air in the conference room was sterile, the kind of quiet that usually precedes a diagnosis. On the mahogany table sat a thin file folder. It looked insignificant, but I knew by the set of Nina's jaw that it contained the autopsy of my financial life. We received a partial closing package from the title company. Nina said, "She didn't open the folder yet. She just rested her hand on it. They are claiming the full file is still under privacy review, but they sent over the identification verification documents and the signature pages. I want you to look at them." She slid the folder toward me. I opened it. The first page was a photocopy of a driver's license. It was my license. The number was correct. The address was 14 Maple Terrace, but the photo was wrong. It was a picture of me. Yes, but it was from my employee ID badge at work. Not the DMV photo. The background was a flat gray. Not the security-patterned blue of a Massachusetts license. And the expiration date had been clumsily altered. The font was slightly different. The black ink too heavy compared to the rest of the card. "It is a composite," Nina said, watching my face, "a cut-and-paste job. Whoever did this had access to a photo of you, likely a digital one, and they overlaid it onto a template. It would never pass a physical inspection, but for a remote closing where you just upload a scan. It was good enough." I turned the page. There was the signature line, Eleanor Claire Griffin. I stared at it. It was terrifying. It wasn't just a forgery. It was a study. The slant was perfect. The way the double F in Griffin crossed was exactly how I did it. But as I looked closer, leaning in until my nose almost touched the paper, I saw it. The pressure, Nina said, pointing with a manicured nail. "Look at the start of the E. See how the ink pools slightly, and again at the top of the C. This wasn't written with a fluid hand. It was drawn. Someone practiced this. They sat down with your real signature and taught their muscles to mimic the shape. But they couldn't mimic the speed. I felt a wave of nausea. Marlene. I pictured her sitting at her kitchen table, a glass of wine in one hand, a stack of my old birthday cards in the other, practicing my name over and over again until she got it right. It was a violation so intimate it made my skin crawl. "It gets worse," Nina said. "We traced the money." She flipped to the next section of the file. It was a wire transfer ledger. The total loan amount from the cash-out refinance was $320,000. I gasped. My original mortgage had been just under $200,000. "Where did the rest go?" I asked. "Follow the lines," Nina said. The funds hit the settlement account at Marwick Valley Title Group on May 20th. From there, they were split. Wire 1, $198,450. Sent to Seaboard Crest Mortgage. Memo payoff. Griffin, that generated your paid-in-full letter. Nina said, that was the smokescreen. They paid off the existing debt to clear the title, making it look like a generous act. If you hadn't checked the registry, you might have gone years thinking your mother just paid your mortgage. Meanwhile, the new debt, the $320,000, would be accruing interest, hidden in the LLC, and the rest I asked, wire 2. $115,000. I looked at the destination. It wasn't sent to Marlene's bank account. It wasn't sent to Griffin Family Holdings. Beneficiary Sunbriar Assisted Living. Reference L. Miller. Buy-in/care deposit. I froze. L. Miller. Linda Miller. My aunt. Marlene's younger sister. Aunt Linda is at Sunbriar. I whispered. She has early onset dementia. Marlene manages her care. Nina nodded. We called Sunbriar. We didn't give them details. Just asked to verify a transaction. They confirmed a wire was received on May 21st. But here's the kicker. Ellie, the money didn't stay there. 2 days later, the facility issued a refund check for $110,000, claiming an overpayment of administrative fees. Refunded to who I asked. Not to you, and not to Marwick Valley Title. They cut the check to a third party at the instruction of the power of attorney holder. Marlene, I said, the The check was made out to Sloan Strategic Trust. Nina said, a consulting firm. I sat back, the room spinning. It was a laundry cycle. Marlene or whoever was guiding her had used my aunt's nursing home account to wash the money. They sent it in as a legitimate care payment, then pulled it out as a refund, effectively breaking the chain of custody. If anyone looked at the nursing home books, it just looked like a billing error. The paid in full letter wasn't a gift, I said, my voice sounding hollow. It was bait. Exactly. Nina said, it was designed to keep you quiet, to make you feel grateful. If you are grateful, you don't ask questions. You don't look at the deed, and by the time you figure it out, the money is gone and the house is leveraged to the hilt. I stood up. I felt a cold clarity washing over me. The confusion was gone. The guilt was gone. All that was left was a sharp, diamond-hard anger. I am going to see her, I said. Ellie, Nina warned, be careful. Do not tip our hand about the wire trace yet. We need to see what she admits to. I won't tip her. I said, I am going to give her a choice. Marlene's condo was in a complex called The Villages at River's Edge. It was a place where people went to pretend they were wealthy retirees. The lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the fountains were dyed an unnatural shade of blue. I didn't call first. I drove straight there. I parked in the guest spot and walked up the path, my heels clicking on the pavement. Marlene opened the door before I could knock. She must have seen me from the window. She was wearing a silk caftan and holding a cup of tea. She looked fragile, her eyes rimmed with red. Ellie, she said, her voice trembling. I knew you would come. I knew you would calm down. I didn't smile. I didn't step inside. I stood on the welcome mat, blocking her view of the sun. I am not calm. Mom, I said, I am clear. She blinked, unsure how to read my tone. Come in, she said. I made scones. I stepped into the foyer but stopped there. I didn't go into the living room. I didn't want to sit on her floral couch. I wanted to keep this transactional. I know about the refinance. I said, I know about the $320,000. I know you forged my signature, and I know you sent the money through Aunt Linda's account at Sunbriar. Marlene's face went slack. The teacup rattled in the saucer. She reached out to steady herself against the wall. You dug that deep, she whispered. I have a lawyer. Mom, a forensic accountant. We traced every penny. I waited for her to deny it. I waited for her to tell me I was crazy, or that it was a mistake, but she didn't. She just looked old. Suddenly, incredibly old. Tell me the truth, I said. My voice was low, devoid of the screaming emotion I had felt days ago. Tell me exactly what happened, and who helped you, or I file the police report today. Marlene flinched as if I had slapped her. You wouldn't, she said. I am your mother. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had the non-emergency line for the Harbor Point Police Department pre-dialed. I said, I will press the call button, and I will report a grand larceny and identity theft. I will give them the notary's name. I will give them the wire transfer numbers. You will go to jail. Mom. She stared at the phone. Then she crumbled. She sank onto the hallway bench, the tea sloshing onto her hand. But she didn't seem to notice. She put her face in her hands and began to weep. It wasn't the manipulative crying she usually did. This was the terrified sobbing of a child who has broken a valuable vase. I didn't mean to steal it, she wailed. I was borrowing it. It was supposed to be a bridge to what I asked. To the investment, she said, looking up, her mascara running down her cheeks. Rhett said we just needed capital. He said if we could get the buy-in money, the returns would pay off the mortgage in 6 months. We were going to be rich. Ellie, I was going to buy you a new car. I was going to pay for Linda's care for the rest of her life. Rhett, I said. This name again. Who is he? Rhett Sloan. She said, he is a genius, a financial mentor. I met him at the club. He has this system, the Sloan Strategic Trust. He helps families unlock their dead equity. Dead equity. I repeated. That sounded like a sales pitch. He told me that leaving the equity in your house was like burying money in the backyard, she said, wiping her nose. He said it was losing value every day due to inflation. He said if we moved it into the LLC, we could leverage it. He set it all up. He found the lender. He handled the notary. I asked. Yes. He said he had a contact who could expedite the paperwork, so we didn't have to bother you with the boring details. He said you were too busy with your career to understand the high-level strategy. I felt a cold fury rising in my chest. This man had played her. He had identified her insecurities, her desire to be the provider, her fear of being useless, and he had weaponized them against me. Where is the money now? I asked. The $110,000 you funneled through Sunbriar. It is with Rhett, she said, in the trust. It is earning 12% interest a month. I closed my eyes. 12% a month. It was a Ponzi scheme, or a simple theft. There was no investment that paid 12% a month. Mom, I said, opening my eyes, that money is gone. No, she insisted. Standing up, it is not I get statements. It is growing. Show me a statement, I said. She ran to her desk and pulled out a glossy folder. She handed me a sheet of paper. It was a printout. Sloan Strategic Trust. Account value, $125,000. Projected annual yield, 150%. It was laughable. It was a spreadsheet anyone could make in Excel. This isn't real. Mom, I said. It is real, she screamed. You just want to believe I am stupid. You want to believe I messed up. But I'm fixing this family. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. You have to meet him. You have to let him explain. If you meet him, you will see. He is brilliant. I looked at her desperate face. I realized then that she needed him to be real. If he was a con artist, then she was a criminal who had destroyed her daughter's life. If he was a genius, then she was a hero who was just misunderstood. She was fighting for her own redemption. Fine, I said. Take me to him. The event was held that evening in the banquet room of the Harbor Point Marriott. A sign on an easel in the lobby read, Wealth Builders of Harbor Point, Unlocking Your Legacy. Marlene had changed into a sequined jacket and applied fresh makeup. She walked with a nervous energy, clutching my arm like a lifeline. The room was filled with people who looked exactly like my mother, older women with dyed hair and hopeful eyes, men in golf shirts who looked like they had been downsized from middle management. There was a bar serving cheap wine in plastic cups. At the front of the room, standing near a podium, was a man. He was younger than I expected, maybe 45. He was handsome in a generic, television actor way. He wore a suit that fit too perfectly, a watch that was too big, and teeth that were too white. That is him, Marlene whispered. That is Rhett. She pulled me toward him. Rhett saw us coming. His eyes flicked to me, assessed my age, my skepticism, and my suit, and for a split second, his mask slipped. I saw calculation. Then the smile returned. Marlene, he boomed, extending a hand. And this must be the daughter, the project manager. Ellie. Right. He knew my job. He knew my name. I didn't shake his hand. I am the owner of the house you stole, I said. The people standing nearby went quiet. Marlene gasped. Ellie. Don't be rude. Rhett didn't flinch. He just lowered his hand and smiled a sad, patient smile. Stole is a very harsh word. Ellie, we engaged in a strategic asset reallocation. Marlene was very clear that she wanted to secure the family's future. By forging my signature, I asked. By using a stolen notary stamp, Rhett took a sip of his sparkling water. I am an advisor. Ellie, I don't handle the clerical details. I connect clients with service providers. If there was a paperwork error, that is certainly regrettable. But let's look at the big picture. Your mother has created a vehicle, Griffin Family Holdings, that is currently outperforming the S&P 500. I stepped closer to him. I could smell his cologne. It smelled like musk and money. Where is the money? Rhett. The $110,000. It is deployed, he said. In high-yield bridge lending, give it back. I said, Wire it back to the mortgage company, tonight, or I go to the police. Rhett leaned in. He dropped the volume of his voice so only I could hear. The charm evaporated. His eyes went dead flat. You could go to the police, Ellie. You could certainly do that. But let's think about what happens. You file a report. They arrest your mother. She is 60 years old. She is frail. Do you think she will do well in a holding cell? He took a step back, raising his voice again for the benefit of the room. Family finance is so emotional, isn't it? That is why we use LLC structures, to remove the emotion. He looked at me again, his eyes boring into mine. And LLCs, they are very hard to unwind, especially when the operating agreement gives full control to the manager. You are just a beneficial member. Ellie, you have no voting rights. If you try to blow this up, you will just be blowing up your mother, and the money legal fees eat up equity very fast. He smiled. Why don't you grab a glass of wine? Marlene tells me you have had a stressful week. I stood there, shaking with rage. He was holding my mother hostage. He knew I wouldn't turn her in. He was banking on my conscience being stronger than my greed. I grabbed Marlene's arm. We are leaving. I dragged her out of the ballroom. She was protesting, apologizing to Rhett over her shoulder. He is just trying to help, she cried as we reached the lobby. Why do you have to be so hostile? I spun her around. He is not helping you. Mom, he is threatening me. He just told me that if I go to the police, he will let you take the fall. He didn't mean it, she said, her eyes darting around. He is a businessman. He is tough. He is a predator. I said, and you are the bait. The next morning, I met Nina at a coffee shop. I didn't want to go to her office. I felt too exposed. I told her about the meeting, about the threat. Nina listened, her face grim. She opened her laptop. I did some digging on Sloan's strategic trust while you were at the party. She said, it is a ghost ship. The entity was formed 6 months ago in Delaware. The registered agent is a P.O. box. But I cross-referenced Rhett Sloan. She turned the screen toward me. There were mugshots. Not current ones, but old ones. His real name is Richard Slattery. Nina said, he has convictions in Florida and Arizona. Senior fraud, unlicensed securities. He served 2 years in the early 2000s. He resurfaced here a year ago. He is a felon, I said, and he is smart. Nina said, he targets the sandwich generation parents, the ones who feel squeezed between their successful children and their own aging. He sells them relevance. He tells them they can be the family savior. He played her perfectly. I said, she felt like she was losing me. She felt like she was just a burden. He told her she could be the hero, and now he has her trapped. Nina said, if she turns on him, she implicates herself in the forgery. If she stays with him, he drains the equity until there is nothing left. I looked out the window at the busy street. People were walking by, drinking coffee, living normal lives where their mothers didn't steal their homes. I realized then that this wasn't just about money. It was about relevance. Marlene was terrified of being invisible. She was terrified that I didn't need her anymore. I was independent. I paid my own bills. I solved my own problems. Rhett had given her a job. He had made her the manager of Griffin Family Holdings. He had given her a title and a secret mission. She wasn't just a victim of greed. She was a victim of her own obsolescence. But that didn't change the math. The clock was ticking. The bridge loan, the real one. The $210,000 from Cobalt Ridge was accruing interest, and Rhett had the other half of the money. If I didn't stop this, the house would be foreclosed on. The LLC would default. Rhett would vanish, and Marlene and I would be left in the rubble. I have to sever the cord. I said to Nina, how Nina asked, she won't testify against him. She is in love with the fantasy. I have to make the reality more terrifying than the fantasy. I said, I pulled out my phone. I opened the recording app. I am going to get her on tape. I said, I am going to get her to admit that Rhett knew about the forgery, that he directed it. That is inadmissible without consent in some contexts. Nina said, but it might be enough to leverage Rhett. If we can prove he was the architect, we can threaten him with a RICO suit, racketeering. That scares guys like him more than a simple fraud charge. I need to get her alone, I said. Away from him, away from the condo. I stood up. I'm going to take her to the house, I said. To the scene of the crime. I left the coffee shop and drove to Marlene's. I didn't ask her if she wanted to come. I told her I needed help with something at the house. A leak. She came because she couldn't resist being needed. That was her drug. When we got to 14 Maple Terrace, I unlocked the door. The house was hot and stuffy. I walked her into the kitchen. The paid in full letter was still on the counter, gathering dust. I stood in the center of the room. Mom, I said, I want you to look at this house. She looked around. Nervous. It is a nice house. Ellie, needs some paint. It is not my house. I said, it is Griffin Family Holdings' house. And right now, Griffin Family Holdings is being driven off a cliff by Richard Slattery. She stiffened. His name is Rhett. His name is Richard. I said, he is a convicted felon. He served time for doing exactly this to people in Florida. I pulled out the printout of the mugshot Nina had given me. I slammed it onto the counter. Look at him, I shouted. Look at your mentor. Marlene stared at the photo. The man in the picture was younger, angrier. But it was him. She touched the paper with a trembling finger. No, she whispered. He has changed. He paid his debt. He is stealing our debt. Mom, I said, he has the money, and he is going to run. And when he does, Cobalt Ridge is going to foreclose on this house. They will kick me out, and they will come after you for the deficiency. I walked over to her and took her hands. They were cold. I need you to choose. Mom, right now. You can be the manager of the LLC and go down with the ship, or you can be my mother. She looked at me. Her eyes were swimming with tears. The defiance was cracking. The fear was seeping through. What do I do? She whispered. I signed everything. I am responsible. You tell me exactly what he told you to do. I said, on the record. You tell me how he got the notary stamp. You tell me how he set up the wire. You give me the weapon to kill him. Marlene took a shuddering breath. She looked at the mugshot. She looked at the paid in full letter. She looked at me. She squeezed my hands. He gave me the pen. She said softly, he brought the papers to the condo. He had the stamp in his briefcase. He told me to practice your name on a napkin first. I felt a surge of triumph, followed immediately by a wave of sorrow. She had done it, but he had handed her the gun. Keep talking. Mom, I said, reaching into my pocket and subtly tapping the record button on my phone. Tell me everything. The legal complaint sat on Nina's desk, a stack of paper thick enough to stop a door. It was titled, Emergency Petition for Injunctive Relief, but it felt like a declaration of war. I read the names of the respondents listed in bold, black ink. Griffin Family Holdings, LLC, Marwick Valley Title Group, Sloan Strategic Trust, and then, buried in the text of the allegations, was the name that made my stomach turn. Marlene Griffin, acting as manager. We are filing this within the hour, Nina said. Her voice was calm. The professional detachments she wore like armor. We are asking the court to freeze everything. No sales, no transfers, no further encumbrances. If the judge grants the temporary restraining order, it locks the property down. It stops Rhett or your mother from draining any more equity. I nodded, staring at the papers. Do we have to serve her? I asked. Yes, Nina said. A process server will deliver it to her condo, and to the registered agents for Marwick and Sloan. I imagined the knock on Marlene's door. I imagined her opening it, expecting a neighbor or a delivery, and being handed a lawsuit filed by her own daughter. It was the nuclear option. But after the meeting at the hotel, after seeing Rhett's smug face and hearing his veiled threats, I knew I had no choice. File it, I said. 2 days later, the response didn't come from the court. It came in my mailbox. I was dreading the mail now. Every time I walked down the driveway to the black metal box at the curb, I felt a spike of adrenaline. I unlocked it. I had changed the lock immediately after the conversation with my neighbors and pulled out a single. Crisp envelope. The return address was not Seaboard Crest. It was not Cobalt Ridge. It was Briarstone Capital Partners, located in a skyscraper in New York City. I ripped it open, standing right there in the street. Notice of assignment of debt. The letter read, "Dear Morgagor, please be advised that the loan previously held by Cobalt Ridge Private Lending has been assigned to Briarstone Capital Partners effective August 2nd. All future payments regarding the property at 14 Maple Terrace should be directed to the address below." I felt the ground tilt. Assigned, that was the legal term for sold. Rhett hadn't just taken out a loan. He had packaged it and sold it. The debt was moving. It was like a virus, jumping from one host to another, getting harder to track and harder to fight. Cobalt Ridge was likely just a shell, a frantic little entity designed to originate the loan and then flip it to a bigger fish like Briarstone before anyone noticed the smell. I went inside and called Nina. "It is a common tactic," she said, her voice tight. "They sell the paper to a larger hedge fund or distressed debt buyer. It complicates the litigation because now Briarstone can claim they are a holder in due course. They can argue they bought the debt in good faith and have a right to collect, regardless of the fraud that originated it. So I am fighting a hedge fund now," I asked. "We are fighting everyone," Nina said, "but this confirms our timeline. Rhett is cashing out. He sold the loan to get his liquidity. He is preparing to cut and run." I hung up and went to my dining room table, which was now my war room. Piles of paper covered the wood surface. I picked up the operating agreement for Griffin Family Holdings, LLC, a document Nina had finally managed to claw out of the discovery process from the initial filing. I had glanced at it before, but I hadn't really read it. I had been too focused on the forgery. Now, I sat down and read every word. It was a trap, a beautifully constructed, legal steel cage. Article 4 Management. The business and affairs of the company shall be managed exclusively by the managing member. The managing member shall have full and complete authority, power, and discretion to manage and control the business. That was Marlene. Article 5 Members. Beneficial members shall have no voting rights, no authority to bind the company, and no right to participate in the management of the company. That was me. And then I found the side letter. It was stapled to the back, an addendum titled, "Family Asset Protection Rider." It stated, in plain English, that while Eleanor Claire Griffin was the equitable owner of the property, she voluntarily ceded all decision-making power to Marlene Griffin for a period of 10 years. In consideration of financial restructuring services provided, I stared at the signature, Eleanor Claire Griffin. It wasn't just a forgery of a deed. It was a forgery of my consent. Marlene hadn't just stolen the house. She had stolen my voice. She had signed a document that legally declared I was too incompetent to manage my own affairs. I felt a surge of rage so hot it burned my throat. I grabbed my keys. Marlene was in her garden when I arrived. She was deadheading petunias, pinching off the withered blooms with a violent efficiency. She didn't look up when I walked onto the patio. "You served me," she said. Her voice was flat. A sheriff came to the door. "The neighbors were watching. You left me no choice," I said. I threw the copy of the side agreement onto the patio table. It landed with a slap. I read the operating agreement. "Mom." She kept pinching the flowers. "It is standard boilerplate." "Ellie," Rhett said. "Stop saying his name," I shouted. "I don't care what Rhett said. I care what you signed. Look at that paper." I pointed to the document. "You signed a clause saying I have no vote. You signed a clause saying you control my house for 10 years. You made me a child in my own life." Marlene finally looked at me. Her eyes were hard, defensive. "I did it because you would never say yes." The admission hung in the air between us, louder than the birds singing in the trees. She threw the gardening gloves down. "I tried to talk to you about money for years. I tried to tell you to invest. I tried to tell you to leverage the equity, but you are so conservative. You are so afraid of risk. You hoard your money in a savings account that earns pennies. I knew if I asked you to do this strategy, you would refuse. You would cite some rule or some regulation, so you decided to break the law I asked, because I wouldn't agree with your investment strategy. You decided to forge my name." "I did it for you," she screamed. I did it because I am the mother. It is my job to look at the horizon, not just the sidewalk. I wanted to give you wealth, Ellie, real wealth, not just a paycheck. You wanted to be important. I said. My voice was deadly quiet. You didn't do this for me. You did this because Rhett made you feel like a CEO. He made you feel powerful, and you sacrificed my safety to feed your ego. Marlene flinched. The truth hit her like a physical blow. She slumped into one of the patio chairs, looking suddenly small. I thought it would work, she whispered. I thought I would hand you a check for $50,000 in a few months, and you would forgive the method. There is no check. Mom, I said, there is only debt. Briarstone Capital owns the loan now. They are a vulture fund. They will foreclose the second a payment is missed. I took a deep breath. This was the hardest part, the part I had practiced in the mirror. I need your key, I said. Marlene looked up, confusion clouding her eyes. What? The key to my house, I said. The one I gave you 3 years ago. I want it back. Ellie. No, she pleaded. I am your mother. I water your plants. I bring in your mail. Not anymore, I said. You don't come into my house. You don't drive past my house. You are not welcome there until the title is back in my name. She began to cry, the tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks. You are banishing me over money over trust, I said. I held out my hand. Give me the key. She dug into her pocket and pulled out her keychain. She struggled with the split ring, her fingers shaking. Finally, she worked the silver key free. She dropped it into my palm. It was warm from her body heat. I closed my fingers around it. It felt like a jagged piece of ice. I am fixing this. Mom, I said, with or without you, but right now, you are the defendant, and I am the plaintiff, and we are not family. We are opposing parties. I walked away. I didn't look back. I knew if I looked back, I would see her weeping in the garden, and I would crumble. I had to stay hard. I had to be the structure she refused to be. The next day, I was back in Nina's office. The mood was tense. The hearing for the preliminary injunction was scheduled for Friday, 3 days away. We have something, Nina said. She plugged her laptop into the large monitor on the wall. Marwick Valley Title finally coughed up the compliance logs. They are trying to show they did their due diligence to avoid liability. They sent over the audio file of the verbal verification call. The what I asked, the call they make before releasing the funds. Nina explained. They have to call the borrower you to confirm the wire instructions and that you understand the terms. It is a fraud prevention measure. She clicked a file named verification_recording_0520.mp3. The room filled with the sound of static, then a ringtone. A female voice answered. Hello, this is Jessica from Marwick Valley Title. Calling for Eleanor Griffin. Is this she? Yes, this is Eleanor. I froze. The voice was clear. It was a woman's voice. It was American. It sounded professional. But it wasn't me, and it wasn't Marlene. It was a younger voice, maybe 30. The cadence was different. I speak fast, clipping my words. This woman spoke with a slow, deliberate drawl. Ms. Griffin, I am just calling to verify the wire instructions for the cash-out proceed. We have a split wire authorized, $198,000 to Seaboard, and $115,000 to the Sunbriar account. Do you authorize this? Yes, the voice said. I authorize it. Please proceed. And you confirm you are the sole signer on the account I do. Thank you. Ms. Griffin. The wire will go out within the hour. The recording ended. I sat in silence, the blood roaring in my ears. Who is that? I whispered. Nina looked at me. You don't recognize the voice. No, I said. It is not me. It is not my mother. Nina tapped the keyboard. We subpoenaed the call detail records. The number Marwick called was listed on the application as your work cell. It is a prepaid burner phone. It was activated 2 days before the closing, and the location data shows it was purchased at the Convenience Plus on Route 9. I knew that store. It was 2 miles from Marlene's condo. Someone helped her, I said. Marlene couldn't pull this off alone. She can't impersonate me. She sounds 60. This woman sounded 30. We are dealing with a ring. Nina said, Rhett has a team. He has a fake notary. He has a fake borrower. He probably has a fake employer verification service too. This is an industrial operation. I need to play this for Marlene. I said, Nina hesitated. If you play it for her, she might tip off Rhett. She already tipped him off. I said, he knows we are coming, but if I play this for her, she can't deny the conspiracy. She keeps saying she did it for me. She keeps saying she signed the papers. But she didn't take this call. Someone else pretended to be me. That might be the thing that breaks her delusion. I didn't go to Marlene's condo this time. I called her and told her to meet me at a neutral location, a park bench by the harbor. I didn't want to be in her space, and I didn't want her in mine. She arrived wearing large sunglasses, hiding her eyes. She sat on the far end of the bench. I pulled out my phone. I'm going to play something. I said, I want you to listen. I pressed play. The voice of the fake Eleanor Griffin floated out into the salty air. Yes, this is Eleanor. I authorize it. Marlene went rigid. She gripped her purse with both hands. Who is that? I asked when the recording ended. Marlene shook her head, staring at the ground. I don't know. Don't lie to me. Mom, I said, that call was made to authorize the wire. The money didn't move without that voice. Who did Rhett use? Was it his secretary? His girlfriend? Marlene's lip trembled. I never met her. Rhett just said. He said he had a compliance associate who would handle the phone traffic. He said you were too busy to take calls during the day. So you knew I asked. You knew someone was going to pretend to be me on the phone. I didn't know it would sound like that. She whispered. He made it sound like an administrative assistant just confirming details. I didn't know she would say, this is Eleanor. You let a stranger steal my name. I said, you let a stranger authorize $100,000 of theft. I didn't think it was theft, she cried, her voice cracking. I thought it was logistics. She flinched when I said Rhett's name. It was a physical reaction, a tightening of her shoulders. Why are you protecting him? I asked. He's going to let you go to jail. I am not protecting him, she said. I am afraid of him. Why? Because he knows things, she said darkly. He knows about other things. What other things? She wouldn't say. She just clamped her mouth shut and looked out at the water. I realized then that the hole was deeper than I thought. Rhett didn't just have her on the mortgage fraud. He had leverage. Maybe she had given him access to other family accounts. Maybe she had recruited her friends. I stood up. We are going to court on Friday. Mom, and I'm going to play that tape for the judge. And if you don't tell me who that woman is, the judge is going to assume it is someone you hired. I can't tell you what I don't know, she insisted. I left her on the bench. As I walked away, I saw her pull out her phone and dial a number. Her hands were shaking so bad she almost dropped it. When I got home, Mrs. Gable from next door was watering her hydrangeas. She waved at me. Mrs. Gable was the neighborhood watch personified. She knew when my trash cans went out and when my mail arrived. Hi, Ellie, she called out. Is your mother okay? I stopped. She is fine. Mrs. Gable, why I haven't seen her in a few days, she said. Usually she is here on Tuesdays. And, well, I saw her talking to that man last week. I thought maybe something was wrong. What man? I asked, walking over to the fence. The one in the gray car. She said, the sedan. Not a nice car. Kind of beaten up. He parked right in front of your driveway. Your mother came out of your house and handed him a thick envelope. I thought maybe it was a contractor or something. But they looked intense. When was this? I asked. Oh, maybe 10 days ago, Mrs. Gable said. And you know, it is funny you ask. Because I saw him a few months ago, too. Back in May. He was fiddling with your mailbox. My mailbox. I felt a chill. Did you see what he did? He looked like he was putting something in or taking something out, she said. I thought he was the mailman at first, but he wasn't wearing a uniform. And then your mother pulled up and he got in her car. I thanked Mrs. Gable and went inside. My legs felt heavy. The man in the gray sedan. The mailbox. It clicked. The notices. The letters from Seaboard Crest. The warnings. I hadn't received them because they were being intercepted. Rhett or his associate had been physically coming to my house to sanitize my mail, and Marlene had been meeting him. She wasn't just a passive participant signing papers at a condo. She was meeting the fixer in my driveway. She was handing off envelopes. I went to my evidence board. I added a new sticky note. The gray sedan. Mailbox tampering. This was a conspiracy. It was active, physical, and invasive. Thursday night, the night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living room with the lights off, watching the street. Every pair of headlights that swept across the window made me jump. I had spent the day with Nina preparing my testimony. I had to go up there and say, under oath, that my mother was a liar and a thief. I had to destroy her credibility to save my home. It felt like a matricide. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was 11:15. I picked it up. A text message from a number I didn't recognize. Area code 617. I opened it. There was no greeting. Just a sentence. Drop the case or the house goes on the market anyway. And below it, an image. I clicked on the photo. It took a second to load. It was a picture of my house, taken from across the street. It was taken at night. I could see the glow of the porch light, and I could see the living room window. In the window, clearly visible through the sheer curtains, was a silhouette. It was me, sitting exactly where I was sitting right now. I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the floor. I scrambled backward, off the couch, crawling on the rug until I was below the window line. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. They were outside. Right now. I reached up and grabbed the phone. Keeping my head low, I dialed 911. 911. What is your emergency? There is someone outside my house. I whispered, they just sent me a picture of myself. They are threatening me. I am sending a unit, the dispatcher said. Stay away from the windows. I crawled into the hallway, away from the glass. I sat with my back against the wall, clutching the phone. I looked at the text again. Drop the case. This wasn't Marlene. Marlene wouldn't do this. This was Rhett, or the man in the gray sedan. They were scared. The injunction hearing was tomorrow. If the judge froze the assets, the game was over. They needed me to fold. I thought about the paid in full letter. I thought about the fake voice on the recording. I thought about my mother practicing my signature on a napkin. And now this. A camera pointed at my sanctuary. Fear washed over me, cold and paralyzing. But then, something else followed it. Indignation. This was my house. I had paid for it with my sweat. I had fought for it in my divorce. I had worked 60-hour weeks to keep the lights on. They thought they could scare me. They thought a picture would make me walk away from the only thing I owned. I heard the sirens in the distance. They were getting closer. I texted the number back. My hands were shaking, but my thumbs were steady. I will see you in court. I didn't delete the photo. I saved it. Evidence item number 10. The police arrived in a wash of blue and red lights. They didn't find anyone. The street was empty, but they took a report. They looked at the text. I told them about the hearing. I told them about Rhett Sloan. The officer, a young guy named Officer Miller, looked at the photo. This is intimidation. Ms. Griffin. Witness tampering. We will patrol the area tonight. I didn't sleep. I sat in the hallway with a kitchen knife and my phone, waiting for the sun to come up. When dawn broke, gray and humid, I stood up, I showered, I put on my best suit, a navy blue blazer that made me look like a fortress. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a witness, and I was ready to burn it all down. I drove to the courthouse. Nina met me on the steps. She looked at the dark circles under my eyes. Are you okay? She asked. I showed her the text. They are watching me. I said. Nina's face went hard. Good, she said. That means they are desperate. We are going to use this. We are going to show the judge that this isn't just a financial dispute. It is a criminal enterprise. We walked through the metal detectors. I looked around the lobby. I saw families, lawyers, criminals, and then I saw her. Marlene was standing near the elevators. She was wearing a gray suit. Standing next to her was a lawyer I didn't recognize, a cheap-looking man with a briefcase that was scuffed at the corners. And behind her, Leaning against the wall, looking at his phone, was Rhett Sloane. He looked up. He saw me. He didn't smile this time. He just stared, a cold, predatory stare. I didn't look away. I walked straight toward them. Marlene looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Ellie," she whispered, "please, we can fix this." I didn't stop. I walked past her lawyer, and past Rhett. "See you inside." "Mom," I said. I pushed open the heavy oak doors of courtroom 4. The air inside was cool and smelled of history and judgment. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table. I laid my hands on the wood. They were steady. The bailiff called out, "All rise." I stood up. The fight for my life had begun. The courtroom air was recycled and cold, smelling faintly of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands clasped so tightly that my knuckles turned the color of old parchment. To my right, Nina Halstead arranged her exhibits with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an amputation. To my left, the gallery was a blur of faces, but I could feel 2 pairs of eyes burning into the back of my neck, my mother's, wet and pleading, and Rhett Sloane's, dry and calculating. Judge Alistair Vance entered, his robe swishing with a heavy, authoritative sound. He was an older man with a face carved from granite and eyes that had seen too many family tragedies to be easily moved. "All rise," the bailiff droned. We stood. We sat. The mechanics of justice began to grind. Nina stood up. She didn't use a dramatic voice. She didn't pace. She simply walked to the podium and laid out the timeline of my life's destruction, as if she were reading a weather report. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is not about a family dispute. It is about a systematic, documented enterprise of fraud. On May 20th, a cash-out refinance was executed on the property at 14 Maple Terrace. The plaintiff, Eleanor Griffin, did not sign the application. She did not sign the note. She did not sign the mortgage." Nina held up a poster-sized exhibit. It was the timeline we had built in her office. May 20th, loan funded. May 21st, wire transfer to Sunbriar Assisted Living, disguised as care payments. May 23rd. Refund check issued to Sloan Strategic Trust. July 10th, payoff of the original legitimate mortgage. July 12th, recording of a fraudulent quitclaim deed. She pointed to the dates. "Notice the sequence, Your Honor. First, they strip the equity. Then, they pay off the original lender to silence the notification systems. Then, and only then, do they transfer the title to an LLC controlled by the perpetrator. This was not a rescue mission. It was a heist." She walked back to the table and picked up the paid-in-full letter. "This document, sent to Miss Griffin," was the anesthetic. It was designed to keep her calm while the surgery was being performed on her financial identity. I watched Marlene. She was sitting at the defense table next to her lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson who looked like he had slept in his suit. Marlene was staring at her hands. She wouldn't look at the timeline. She wouldn't look at me, but the opposition wasn't just Marlene. Seated at the far end of the table was a lawyer from a high-end Boston firm, representing Briarstone Capital Partners, the hedge fund that had bought the debt from Cobalt Ridge. His name was Sterling, and he looked like he cost more per hour than I made in a week. Sterling stood up when it was his turn. He didn't look at the timeline. He looked at me. "Your Honor," he said, his voice smooth and rich, like expensive scotch, while Ms. Halstead paints a picture of victimhood. "Let us look at the facts of benefit. Ms. Griffin's original mortgage, a debt of nearly $200,000, was satisfied, paid in full. She lives in the home. She pays no mortgage. She enjoys the shelter." He turned to the judge. "The Griffin Family Holdings, LLC is, as the name suggests, a family entity. The manager is the plaintiff's mother. The beneficiary is the plaintiff herself. This is not theft. This is an estate planning strategy that the plaintiff is now regretting because she dislikes the loss of control. But regret, Your Honor, is not grounds for an injunction." He gestured to the paperwork. "Briarstone Capital purchased this debt in good faith. We hold a valid assignment. If the court freezes this asset, You are punishing a legitimate lender for a domestic squabble." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. He was twisting it. He was making it sound like I was a spoiled child complaining about a birthday present. Nina called me to the stand. I walked up the 3 steps to the witness box. I swore to tell the truth. I sat down. The wood of the chair was hard. "Ellie," Nina asked, standing near the jury box, though there was no jury today. "Just Judge Vance. Did you ask your mother to pay off your mortgage?" "No," I said. "Did you ask her to form an LLC?" "No." "Did you authorize the refinance with Cobalt Ridge number?" Sterling stood up to cross-examine me. He buttoned his jacket. "Ms. Griffin," he said, "you were struggling financially after your divorce. Were you not?" "I was budgeting," I said, keeping my voice steady. "There is a difference between struggling and drowning. I paid my bills." "But you complained to your mother. You told her you were worried I confided in her," I said, "because she is my mother, and when she presented you with the paid-in-full letter. Did you return the money? Did you write a check to Seaboard Crest to reinstate the debt? I didn't have the money," I said. It had already been paid. "So you accepted the benefit," Sterling said, smiling slightly. "You accepted the freedom from debt, and now that the bill has come due for the new loan, a loan taken out to secure your family's future, you want to disown the responsibility." I leaned into the microphone. I looked directly at Sterling. "It isn't a benefit," I said. My voice didn't shake. I was surprised by how cold I felt. If someone steals your car, sells it, and uses the money to buy you a bus pass, you haven't benefited. You have been robbed. I looked at the judge. This house was the only thing I owned that was truly mine. It was my stability. My mother didn't give me a gift. She gave me a leash. She put a collar around my neck and handed the chain to a stranger named Rhett Sloan. And now she is telling me I should be grateful that she didn't choke me with it yet. The courtroom was silent. Judge Vance made a note on his pad. "You may step down," the judge said. Nina stood up. "Your Honor, we call Jules Mercer to the stand." A ripple of confusion went through the defense table. Marlene looked up, startled. Rhett, who was sitting in the back row of the gallery, shifted in his seat. The doors opened, and a young woman walked in. She looked nervous. She was wearing a simple blouse and slacks, clutching a purse like a shield. "Jules Mercer," Nina said, "you were employed by Marwick Valley Title Group until last month. Is that correct?" "Yes," Jules said, her voice barely a whisper. "And in what capacity?" "I was a closing coordinator." Nina walked over to the exhibit table and picked up the file for my house. "Are you familiar with the closing for 14 Maple Terrace?" "Yes," Jules said. She looked at Rhett in the back of the room, then quickly looked away. "I processed the file." "Did you verify the borrower's identity?" Nina asked. Jules hesitated. "I was told the verification had been handled." "Handled by whom?" "By Mr. Sloan," Jules said. Nina let the name hang in the air. "Mr. Sloan is not an employee of the title company." "Is he no?" Jules said. "But he brought us a lot of volume. He was a preferred partner. My boss told me that when a file came from Sloan Strategic Trust, we were to fast-track it." "What does fast-track mean?" Nina asked. "It means we don't hold up funding for minor conditions," Jules said. "Like verifying the ID?" Nina asked, holding up the altered driver's license. Jules looked down at her hands. "Mr. Sloan brought the package in personally. He said the borrower was a high-net-worth individual who valued privacy and couldn't come to the office. He provided the notary acknowledgement, he provided the ID scan, and the verbal verification call." Nina asked. "The call where a woman pretending to be Ellie Griffin authorized the wire." Jules started to cry. It was a quiet, shameful weeping. "I didn't make the call," she said. "I was told to log it as complete. Mr. Sloan said his assistant would handle the coordination. He said if I asked too many questions, I would be killing the deal, and I needed the bonus." I looked at Rhett. He wasn't looking at the witness. He was looking at his phone, typing furiously. "Thank you, Jules," Nina said. Then she turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this establishes the pattern. The title company abdicated its duty because they were being pressured by a third-party promoter who had a financial interest in the transaction. Sterling tried to object, claiming hearsay, but the judge overruled him. The damage was done. The mechanism of the fraud was exposed. Now it was time for the architect. Or rather, the face of it. We call Marlene Griffin. Nina said. Marlene stood up. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. The gray suit swallowed her. She walked to the stand with the gait of an old woman. She swore to tell the truth. Mrs. Griffin, Nina said, standing close to the witness box. Did you sign your daughter's name to the quitclaim deed? Marlene gripped the railing. I signed as her agent. Did you have a power of attorney document authorizing you to act as her agent? We had a verbal understanding. Marlene said, her voice trembling. Ellie always told me to help her if she was in trouble. Did she tell you to sell her house to an LLC? It wasn't a sale, Marlene insisted. It was a transfer. It was staying in the family. Nina walked back to the table and picked up a piece of paper. Mrs. Griffin, you claim this was a paperwork confusion. You claim you thought you were acting legally. Yes, Marlene said. Rhett? Mr. Sloan. He told me it was standard procedure for asset protection. Nina placed the paper in front of Marlene. This is a transaction record from the Harbor Point Market Co-op. It is dated May 18th. Do you recognize this purchase? Marlene squinted at the paper. It is groceries, milk, bread, and this item. Nina asked, pointing to the bottom of the receipt. A prepaid cellular phone, Mint Mobile, $40. Marlene went pale. And here, Nina said, overlaying another document, is the call log from that prepaid phone. The first call made was to Marwick Valley Title Group on May 20th. The duration was 3 minutes, the exact length of the verification recording where a woman impersonated your daughter. Nina leaned in. Who bought that phone? Mrs. Griffin. Marlene's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. The receipt is linked to your loyalty card number, Nina said. You scanned your co-op card to get the points. You bought the burner phone. You bought the tool used to defraud your daughter. Marlene looked at me. Her eyes were wide, terrified. She looked like she was drowning. I didn't make the call, she cried out. I just bought the phone. Rhett told me he needed a secure line for the business. He said he couldn't use his main line for sensitive banking. But you knew, Nina pressed. You knew someone was going to use that phone to pretend to be Ellie. I didn't want to know. Marlene sobbed. She put her face in her hands. I just wanted to save us from what Nina asked. From a mortgage Ellie was paying perfectly on time. From the crash, Marlene screamed. The room went dead silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Marlene looked up, her face ravaged by tears and ruined makeup. You don't understand, she whispered, looking at me. You think everything is stable. You think your little job and your little house are safe. But the crash is coming. Rhett showed me. He showed me the data, the inflation, the collapse of the dollar. He said if we didn't have hard assets, if we didn't have liquidity, we would be on the street. She reached out toward me, her hand trembling in the air. I lost your father's pension. Ellie, years ago, I made bad investments. I have nothing. I am living on credit cards and Social Security. I was going to lose the condo, and if I lost the condo, I would be a burden on you. I would drag you down. She took a shuddering breath. Rhett promised me. He said if we leveraged the house, we could make enough to refill the pension. We could be safe. I did it so I wouldn't have to ask you for money. I did it so I could still be your mother, not your dependent. I stared at her. The truth finally sat in the room with us. It wasn't just greed. It was shame. She had been hiding her own financial ruin for years, and Rhett had offered her a magic wand. She had set fire to my house to keep herself warm, telling herself she was saving us both from freezing. Nina looked at the judge. No further questions. Judge Vance cleared his throat. He looked at Marlene with a mixture of pity and severity. This court has heard enough to establish a prima facie case of fraud, he said. He turned to the defense table. Mr. Sterling, your client, Briarstone Capital, may indeed be a holder in due course, but the underlying instrument appears to be forged. A forged deed conveys no title. Therefore, the security interest claimed by your client is likely void. He banged his gavel. I am issuing a temporary restraining order. Marlene Griffin is removed immediately as manager of Griffin Family Holdings, LLC. I am appointing a neutral receiver to take control of the entity and the property. There will be no sale, no transfer, and no foreclosure proceedings until the full trial can determine the validity of the deed. He looked at Marlene and Mrs. Griffin. I am referring the transcript of this hearing to the district attorney's office for review regarding potential criminal charges. Marlene slumped forward, putting her head on the table. Her lawyer didn't comfort her. He was already packing his briefcase. I sat there, feeling the adrenaline drain out of me, leaving me cold and empty. We had won. The house was frozen. Marlene was stopped. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a funeral. Nina touched my arm. Ellie, look. I turned around. The back row of the gallery was empty. Rhett Sloan was gone. We walked out of the courthouse into the blinding afternoon sun. The humidity hit me like a physical weight. Where did he go? I asked. Scanning the parking lot. He slipped out while your mother was testifying. Nina said, he knows the game is up. He will try to disappear. What about the money? I asked. The $110,000? Nina grimaced. That is the hard part. The judge froze the house, but the cash is likely liquid. Rhett probably moved it to an offshore account or converted it to crypto 10 minutes after the hearing started. We will chase it. Ellie. But I have to be honest with you. It might be gone. And the house. It is in limbo, Nina said. The receiver will manage it. You can stay there. But technically, you are a tenant of the court right now. We have to file a quiet title action to unwind the deed. It will take months, maybe a year, and Briarstone will fight us every step of the way. They want their money. I looked at the courthouse doors. Marlene hadn't come out yet. She was probably inside with her lawyer, trying to figure out if she was going to be arrested today or tomorrow. She did it because she was broke. I said, she lost Dad's pension. Nina nodded. Desperation makes people easy targets. Rhett knew exactly which buttons to push. I have to go home, I said. I just need to be in my house. Be careful, Nina said. Rhett is cornered, and cornered animals bite. I drove home on autopilot. The streets of Harbor Point looked the same as they always did, the manicured lawns, the kids riding bikes, but the overlay of safety was gone. I saw the fragility in everything now. I saw how easily a signature could be faked, how quickly a life could be dismantled. I pulled into my driveway. The house looked tired. The paint was peeling slightly near the gutters. It was just wood and brick, but it was the battlefield where my life was happening. I walked up the porch steps. I reached into my purse for my keys, the new keys I had made after taking Marlene's back. I stopped. The front door was unlatched. It was open just a crack, maybe half an inch. I froze. I knew I had locked it. I always locked it. I checked the deadbolt 3 times before I left for court. I pushed the door open with my fingertips. Hello, I called out. My voice trembled. Silence. I stepped inside. The air was still. I walked through the living room. Nothing seemed disturbed. The TV was there. My laptop was on the coffee table. I walked into the kitchen. My eyes went to the counter. The paid in full letter was there. The stack of mail was there. But the spot where I kept my evidence folder, the thick accordion file where I had been collecting the deed, the photos of the gray sedan, and the printed emails was empty. I ran to my office. The filing cabinet drawer was open. The folder marked Mortgage Docs was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs. They had been here, while I was in court, while Marlene was confessing. Someone had come into my house, Rhett, or the man in the gray sedan. They hadn't taken valuables. They had taken the paper trail. They were scrubbing the scene. I backed out of the office, my breath coming in short gasps. I went back to the kitchen, reaching for my phone to call Nina. Then I saw it. Stuck to the granite countertop, right next to where the evidence folder had been, was a single yellow sticky note. I leaned closer. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. It wasn't Marlene's loop. It was sharp, aggressive block letters. Families share. I stared at the note. It was a mockery. It was the phrase Marlene had used to justify the theft family's share thrown back in my face as a threat. It meant they knew everything. It meant they had been listening to my conversations with my mother. It meant that even though the judge had frozen the assets, the war wasn't over. I wasn't safe. The lock on the door meant nothing. The court order meant nothing to a man who could walk into my home in broad daylight and leave a message on my kitchen counter. I picked up the note. My fingers were shaking so hard the yellow paper fluttered like a dying moth. I walked to the front door and locked it. I slid the deadbolt. I put the chain on. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, clutching the sticky note. I was the owner of the house again, at least on paper. But as the shadows lengthened across the floor, I realized that possession was 9/10 of the law, and fear was 10/10 of reality. I was alone, and they were still out there. Thank you so much for listening to Part 6 of A Paid in Full Notice Hit My Mortgage. We are deep in the legal battle now, and while Ellie has won a temporary victory in court, the psychological war with Rhett Sloan is just beginning. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Please drop your location in the comments below. And if you are enjoying this saga of betrayal and justice, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories so you don't miss the next chapter. What do you think is on that missing folder that Rhett wants so badly? And what is the hidden crisis Marlene is still keeping secret? Share your theories in English in the comments.